Thank you for listening to the Allender Center podcast. I'm Dr. Dan Allender.
And I'm Rachel Clinton Chen. We're fiercely committed to providing hope and healing to a fragmented world.
And restoration for the heart.
Thank you for joining us. Let's get this conversation started.
Well, our listening audience, Happy New Year. Indeed, we are beginning, who knows where we are moving in the year 2022, but I have the immense privilege and delight to be able to talk about the end of the year and the beginning of the year with my beloved wife, Becky. So welcome, Becky.
Thank you. It's so good to be on with you. Happy New Year to you too, and to everyone listening.
Well, as we begin this process of talking about the end of the year and, in some sense, the beginning of a new year, it's just so important to be in a position to be able to say, how do we engage all that occurred? And without going into the specifics of what the year held for each of us, all we can say is we're in the middle of a pandemic. We're in the middle of a profound political and cultural polarization, populism, racial trauma, economic inflation, and the reality of COVID. So all that to say, we're not immediately going to address the year and all that occurred, but it's just simply a time for each and every person to begin the process of doing some degree of appraisal, where you really do reflect on what the year held for you, what got you through the year well, what actually didn't bring goodness. So this is a period where, as we are launching on January 1st, this podcast, it's an invitation for you to do some of the work that we're going to talk about that we've done and that we continue to do, because I don't think you make New Year resolutions as much as you focus on what would I want to become? What do I do with the reality that even though this transitional moment of beginning a new year in some ways is incredibly artificial in that it's just another day. It's just, in one sense, another year. Yet, even though there is some degree of fabrication of meaning by using the term the beginning of the year, there's still something really valuable to be done in being able to look at the circumstances, but also to look at who we are as a character to be able to engage this. So just to begin, my love, what do you bring from last year where you go, oh, it was good. This is good. This helped us do well in the midst of a very crazy past year.
Mm-hmm. Well, hands down, it would be first our morning cup of coffee that we each receive from the other. And I hear that you make coffee more often than I do, and that you bring me my first cup of coffee.
So. I think that we did have a bit of an argument over this, that who actually makes the coffee? I would say it's 85% of the time me.
I would never say that.
And I would say I generally bring you your first cup of coffee in bed, where it's clear that at least as we rise and begin our day, you don't want to have much conversation. Mm-hmm. This is not a time to go, how was your night? How did you sleep? What dreams? Whatever. What's going on for the day? It's a time where, at least from my perspective, I get your coffee and I depart.
Yeah. Well, we do have a different alignment here, but it is a ritual, and it's very holy, actually. That first cup of coffee that I don't always even finish is just a cozy, wonderful time where I like to sit in bed with a couple of pillows and a pillow on my lap, and I watch the sky change. And so that is just, we had 2 grandchildren with us last weekend, and I really wanted that cup of coffee upstairs which you had not awakened yet. So I didn't quite make it back to my bed. And that's like such a time of just peace, no pressure, time reflecting to God and Jesus and the Holy Spirit, just the beginning of joy of a new day, thankfulness, gratitude. And I'm trying to begin every morning with saying, thank you, God, I'm alive. Thank you for breath. And just from the get-go, have that stance of gratitude and actually speaking that out loud.
And I don't have anything comparable to that cup of coffee. When I think about what my day begins with, it is bringing, at least I think, bringing you the coffee. And then I, generally speaking, launch into the email that have come from either last night or the days before. So in some sense, I begin working well before I think is helpful. So already we're beginning to put words to what sustains you, grounds you, and gives you a kind of rhythm that enables you to have goodness and grounding. On the other hand, I think part of the reflection at the beginning of a new year is looking back and saying, that was not helpful. Generally speaking, the way I began my day was not something that I want to take into this coming year. So there is this discernment process, which is why I say it is a time for appraisal, for reflection, and then for a new level of response ability. And I say the word response ability, and I hear how many people would say that, responsibility, which generally means do what you need to do what you should do, versus we have the capacity to respond differently, to uniquely begin to craft and shape what we want out of any period of time or space. And in that sense, I've come to say, I'm not doing well in how I've begun my day, but I can go and say what we do for our first 45 minutes of being together is a walk. It's about 2.2 miles. I could say that the walk itself is a rhythm in our lives, but we're going to come in a bit to define that a little bit more. But what I'd say is there are rituals in that walk. Like from the time we leave the house to really almost a certain spot, we talk about what our dream life was like. And then from that spot on to another, we talk about what the day holds for each of us. Usually we read one psalm and talk about that psalm for another portion of the walk.
Yeah, we read the psalm not together.
Yeah,
we're separately in it with our first cup of coffee.
And then we begin to pray. So that structure of a rhythm has actually within it certain rituals. And again, we'll come back to try and put words to why those are important categories. But I would say, as I think about launching into the year 2022, if we didn't have that walk,
that would be a betrayal in a sense to not continue that together, because we both love it so much. It's so important. And so obviously grounding as we walk.
Yeah. So I think that's part of what we're inviting you to begin to do. Not to plan for what the next year holds. Not yet, at least. But at least to course back over certain times of the year, certain moments that were highlights or lowlights, or in many ways in between. But coming back to this question of what structures enabled you to live well? And what other ways of being in the world actually did not bring you the very good that you would desire? And I think that assessment and reflection is so crucial to begin a process of being able to hold the year with some degree of both grief and gratitude, but also, as we will do in our next episode, talk a bit more about how you re-engage the year ahead for good. But let me go back to that category of rhythms and rituals. When you think of rhythms in terms of what we've been talking about, how would you put words to that concept?
Well, I think rhythms kind of go along with the hours of the day, and our rhythm in the morning is it's a given, whenever we choose to step outside, and then the rituals are within the rhythm. But for sure, the rhythm of coffee alone and walking together has become a ritual. So, I mean, they're overlapping, but they keep us. I was thinking like train tracks. Like there's a rhythm and there's a ritual. One side's a rhythm, one's a ritual, and we're in between. It keeps us grounded, and it keeps us together. In a way that moves us forward.
Yeah, grounded, moving, and communal. So in one sense, I would think of rhythm as how we structure a day, how we structure time and space to move through a day. And mostly the rhythms that we encounter in our lives, more often than not, they're rhythms that have been imposed upon us by getting kids to school. Getting meals ready, going through a process of getting to work, doing your work, getting home from work, doing your Zoom work, etc. So many of the rhythms seem imposed from outside. So important for you to be able to say what choice, what intentionality, what power do you have to create the rhythms? So for us, I would go back to say the rhythm of how we begin a day has become so crucial for finding a sense of goodness in a particular era that has so much loss and heartache and confusion and disruption. So the greater degree of clarity and choice in making rhythms provides a greater sense of how a day feels on your behalf.
And which for us has changed dramatically with COVID and Zoom, because you were a man that traveled often, went to school, commuted to school. So our rhythms are completely different. Plus we are nearing retirement age. And so that alone gives us a different opportunity than we've ever had, ever had in our married lives.
Yeah. So situations obviously have the potential to demand a change in rhythm. But sometimes, again, back to this issue of character, who do you want to become? How do you want to live? Becomes another basis by which I think I have come to say I could do email in the morning, but there is something that I see in you, in how you engage the beginning of a day, that I look at and go, I want more of that. I want more of what I see to be the benefits of your engagement, even though I'm more efficient in getting certain work done by doing that. I'm coming to say, I think efficiency, at least at my age, is something that I don't want to have being a dominant, overarching demand. And given that I've recently had shoulder surgery, and I'm operating mostly with one arm, getting dressed, brushing my teeth, and every other thing that happens in a bathroom now takes way longer. And the process of moving through a day, I'm taking, I might guess it's somewhere between 20 and 30% more time to do things that I would be able to get done very quickly. Even though it's caused me, and I think obviously a certain degree of impatience and irritation, I've also had a sense of, oh, I like that rhythm. There's something about going slower that feels more honorable, life-giving, and sweet that I want more of. So I think in some ways, that's what we're inviting you again to be putting words to. What do you want to bring? What do you want to leave behind as we begin to talk about certain rhythms?
And I think what you're saying is you like the care that you're giving yourself. You're being more full of care since your shoulder surgery, because you have to be. You have to be more cautious walking down the stairs. I mean, everything about your whole frame needs to be full of care.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're learning at this time in our lives too. Everything, not just because you've had shoulder surgery, but everything needs to be more mindful and full of care, which is not fast and efficient.
No. And again, when you begin to bump up against things like efficiency that seem not only practical, but useful, but I've begun to name, as I've named in other ways, it really is a form of idolatry. It is actually a commitment to making life work in a way that in the long run steals me of life. And so by both circumstance and character, we've got to be able to look at our rhythms and to be able to say, are they leading to life? But I also want to begin to define a little bit better the category of ritual. So when you think of rituals, what do you hold from what we've already put words to?
Well, I think there's more holiness in ritual, because I think it goes a bit deeper than a rhythm. It just goes deeper. And I think that's what we're yearning for, is being more present, more connected to the ground, our space. We're just wanting more mindfulness with our bodies and our minds and thinking. So you just wrote a book, and one of the chapters, chapter 6, was on the stranger, and you confessed your workaholism.
I did?
You did.
Oh.
We studied it today in book club. And I thought, wow, you're putting out there, Dr. Allender, like you've got that in print. And that's something to really, that's huge for you to say that and then really make changes.
Well, I can say it, but I wasn't really intending to change. But I think in some ways, the benefit of this current era I just can't travel in the way that I once did. But also the current moment, not just era, but the current moment of I am somewhat incapacitated. Mm-hmm. And if I'm not willing to, in one sense, not only learn to do my passive exercises, to work on my shoulder, I'm going to be in great trouble. But also, if I can't learn and receive something of the goodness of God in this moment, then I indeed am even more foolish than I often perceive myself to be. So we need rituals. And the way you put it, let me go back to, and that is, it deepens. It deepens something of the movement of our lives, not only in space and time, but in terms of our own sense of character and the story that we have been written to reveal. So the way I would put it is this: rituals are a set-aside context for us to worship. And I know for many people, when you hear the word worship, you're thinking prayer, which can be part of our rituals, singing, music, praise songs, which again can be. But staring out the window and watching the sky change is also something that I want people to hear is a ritual that brings us a taste of awe and gratitude. So worship is the intersection of awe, a sense of wonder, an ability to receive surprise that literally takes your breath away, while also being so aware that this gift of glory, of beauty, of goodness, truly of rescue, is it's gratuitous. It's a gift. We don't deserve it, but it is ours to receive and to enjoy and delight and play in the middle of. So in that sense, rituals open the door to the deepening of our connection with God through awe and through gratitude. So when you think of that, awe and gratitude, how does that play with what you've already put words to?
Well, I think, I just have to have more than watching the morning sky with a cup of coffee. Like that won't get me through the day. So I think too, I'm taking time to enjoy a second cup of coffee or tea, either mid-morning or like around 1 or 2, because that's a nice sit. I don't do. I sit and I use my 5 senses. Sometimes I'll just touch different things. Sometimes I will smell different smells with aromatherapy or candles, or go outside in the garden. Sometimes I'll just sit and listen, see, try and hear different sounds. I practice those 5 senses because I've been a person that's been busy and a doer a good portion of my life. And now it's time to incorporate awe and gratitude. And just by stopping helps a lot. That's just being.
I have to admit, that kind of freaks me out because the idea of being very conscious of, I want to touch something, to be present and alive. I love it. I love the thought, but it is so foreign to almost every portion of how I have lived in this body, on this earth, in this time and season. But when I think about certain rituals, I go back to what we do as we end up in this walk, because I love hearing about where your wild, I think personally, your dream life is nuts. And it, at one level, terrifies me, but also incredibly intrigues me. That's what I mean by awe.
I know.
And then I'm grateful that I don't dream like you.
I know, they're so different. But it's fun to return to that, because when we were newlyweds, we would awaken one another a couple times during the middle of the night and tell each other our dreams. And I remember you were always so disturbed by what I was dreaming, but I'm equally disturbed with what you're dreaming. But we've returned to that, but at a better time of the day, not awakening each other as newlyweds would.
Well, I think I was probably looking for connubial bliss, but I was willing to hear your dreams. The reality is that's a ritual. It's part of a rhythm, but there is something about being able to know where your heart, mind, soul went to in that period. But then talking about the day is probably, that's a little bit less.
Let's just say, I think God does talk to us in our dreams, and we are exercising that a bit too. Well, what is the meaning? And a lot of times it's been helpful.
Oh, no question. But I think I'm often more freaked out by what you dream.
I dream in technicolor.
You do.
And fabric and patterns.
Which means your sensuality. In part, I think, because you touch trees and you smell aromatherapy and you listen to bird song. I think there's something, again, in those, again, I call them rituals, but in that sense, because you set aside the time, because you're actually open not just to a process, but to the presence of the goodness of God in those moments. So that's the nature to me of ritual, of being able to go, I begin a day when I come to my office in ways that feel much more like a ritual. I go through the Lord's Prayer. I usually have some music. I have a cup of coffee. It's preparatory. I end a day, particularly by reflecting on what the day held, and then coming to Romans 16, verse 20 and 21, to be able to say, may the God of peace be with us soon, when he will crush evil under our feet. That, to me, ends the day that I've had. So when we begin to put words to rituals, I know there are a few things that deepen meaning, hold holiness, and allow my heart to come not just into a process like rhythm, but into a presence of God's goodness. But I also know, as I enter 2022, I need more than that. I need more than what I have had. And I'm beginning to explore what does my heart need? And if you have a sense, I would love to hear.
Well, I think we're both yearning more scripture, more words of God. I go to Hebrews 13:20. May the God of peace, who brought again from the dead our Lord Jesus Christ, equip you with all you need for doing his will. I think to end the day with that. And then, we need a God of peace. And we need more peace, period. And I think that's what we're yearning for. A bit more cloistering from the world.
Yeah, less hectic, less driven, in many ways less efficient. So in our reflection, what we're going to begin as we come back and start another portion of this reflection next week, we want to begin to talk about how one shapes the intentional process to create the kind of goodness we're going to need to live well into this year. And I think that's where we've got a long cultural history of making, what's the word? I literally blocked on it.
A cultural history of making, I don't know where you're headed, honey.
Where you make plans for the year.
Resolutions.
Yes. New Year's resolutions. And that's why health clubs often see a rise up 20 to 30% of people coming in, new memberships. They want to get in shape. They want to lose weight. They want to do this. And again, there's something so very good about making New Year's resolutions. But I think it's more honorable to be asking, what's my intent? What do I wish to become? And not just what do I wish to do, that included in that, but how do we frame the process to actually get clearer on what will we bring in, what will we discard, and what will we try new as we go into this year? So as we end our first podcast of the year, my beloved, any thoughts before we depart?
No, I'm excited. I'm excited for what's ahead. I'm excited about change, and I'm excited about keeping those rituals that are working.
Yeah, and I can say I get excited when I think about the reality that we get to bring something into the madness of this current world. And that grounding, that depth, that delight and honor, and the sweetness of what we can create together as a couple, what you can create on your behalf, and hopefully with your beloveds, we need to have an anticipation that as difficult as this coming year, I believe, will be, that we've learned over 2 years that we're not going to escape this particular difficult era. But in it, we've got a grounding, but we also have a purpose that we can begin to live and to play and to offer to others. And that's part of the rhythm and ritual that if we intend to bring goodness to ourselves and others, there will be something really lovely that comes as a result of this year.
The Allender Center podcast is produced by the Seattle School of Theology and Psychology.
If you'd like more information about the Allender Center, you can look at theallendercenter.org.